Our story kicks off with a group of soldiers shooting at a woman, but they're no match for her. She takes them down effortlessly with just a sword. Clearly, she's not human. After that, we see a girl rescuing a child, but we'll get more on that later. Then, we cut to the woman who single-handedly wiped out an army. She tells the girl she killed them all because no one was there to stop her, calling it boring since they're a weak species. Now we jump to 2020, where everything in the city seems normal. That's when we meet our protagonist, Sahashi Minato. He's 19 and has just failed his second attempt to get into university. He calls his mom to break the news, and she offers to let him come back home, but he says he'll think about it for a couple of days. As he's walking, he notices the news talking about this strange company called MBI, run by a peculiar guy named Manaka Hoda. Meanwhile, a girl is being chased, and the protagonist keeps walking, feeling down about his failures, thinking he'll never even get a girlfriend. What he doesn't know is that a girl is about to literally fall from the sky. Her name is Musubi. She thanks him for being a soft landing, but Minato is speechless, not just because she's beautiful but because they're immediately attacked. Now they're being chased by these two twins who shoot lightning from their hands. Musubi grabs Minato's hand, and they run for it. Later, Minato wakes up to find Musubi next to him. She doesn't know where she is, and Minato is frantically telling her he didn't do anything inappropriate. Without a second thought, Musubi thanks him for the pajamas, making Minato even more nervous. He thought it was all a dream, but nope, it's real. While out on a walk, Musubi apologizes for dragging him into all this. Minato, meanwhile, can't stop thinking about how soft her hand feels. Musubi soon collapses from hunger, so Minato takes her to get some food, and she's super grateful. Later, she reveals that she has nowhere to go and asks if she can stay with him. He agrees, but asks if anyone's after her. At that moment, she gets close and says she wishes someone like him could become her Ashikabi. She explains that an Ashikabi is someone born to guide them, hinting that she's not human. She's actually a Sekirei. Minato is still processing this when the landlord warns him that no one else can stay in the apartment since it's for singles only. Musubi gets hungry again, so Minato takes her out to eat, spending a lot of money. In return, she promises to make dinner. They split up, he goes to the bank, and she heads to the store. On the way to the bank, Minato runs into the electric twins, who recognize him and ask where Musubi is. Just then, she shows up, and Minato warns her to run. The twins attack, injuring Musubi, but she stands up to fight. Minato intervenes, pulling her out of harm's way, and at that moment, Musubi starts feeling something. They run for it, dodging lightning strikes, and end up in an alley. Musubi tells Minato her body feels really hot, which puts them in an awkward situation. Before things can escalate, the twins find them. Musubi prepares to kiss Minato, and despite the twins' attempts to stop it, they fail. After the kiss, Musubi starts glowing and sprouts wings. The twins admit defeat, knowing they can't touch her now. Moments later, Musubi fights them off, forcing them to retreat, but not before telling Musubi to keep working her way up. Then, a masked guy named Hamura shows up, scolding the twins for going after someone without wings. They try to fight him, but he ignores them. The twins hint that the stage is being set for a battle royale. Back with Minato and Musubi, he asks her what they are, and she tells him they're Sekirei. Later that night, Minato's sister, Yukari, calls him, shocked that he failed the university exam again. Minato asks her for some clothes for Musubi, still not fully understanding what's going on, but he's kind of enjoying the situation. Suddenly, the TV turns on, and Manaka appears to congratulate Minato for bonding with a Sekirei. Manaka knows that Minato has failed the exam twice and goes on to explain the Sekirei project. Now, Minato realizes that Musubi has to fight other Sekirei, and he's her partner, known as her Ashikabi. It's a secret project, so Manaka warns that if he tells anyone, MBI will use all its resources to capture him. Speaking of MBI, they soon show up at Minato's place to drop off some supplies. The landlord also returns and kicks both of them out. The next day, they're looking for a new place to live, but it's not easy. They're rejected from 30 places. It starts raining, and Minato gets really down, thinking he's a failure for not passing the exam twice and worrying he's not special enough to be an Ashikabi. Musubi, sensing his doubt, makes a promise to stand by him and do anything for him. In that moment, she creates a tornado and they soar into the sky. Cut to Manaka, who talks about the 108 Sekirei and how they must fight each other for their chosen Ashikabi. The last one standing will guide their Ashikabi to the heavens, changing the fate of the universe. Meanwhile, we briefly see a young girl crying for help, surrounded by trees. Back to Minato and Musubi, she realizes she didn't think about how they would get back down after flying so high. They end up falling, but before they hit the ground, that same young girl appears briefly. They land on the property of a woman named Miya-sama, who lets them in and treats their wounds. Miya isn't alone, she's with a guy named Kaguri, who asks what they're doing there and how they got in. Minato is about to explain, but he remembers he can't say anything about their identities. Musubi returns, now dressed in a kimono Miya lent her. Minato apologizes for trespassing, but Miya is happy to help, saying that's what her late husband would have wanted. Musubi smells something delicious. It turns out they were preparing dinner. Miya invites them to stay for the meal, and they meet another resident, Kusano. Minato notices they're all pretty different and guesses they're not a family. Miya reveals that this place is a boarding house called Izumo Inn, and she's the landlady. Kusano mentions it's a perfect, affordable spot for carefree people like them, which offends Miya a bit. Minato takes the chance to beg Miya to let them stay, and she has no problem with it, continuing her late husband's spirit of kindness. Kaguri wonders if it's really okay to let them stay. She mentions that if Minato and Musubi ended up there, it must have been fate, so they welcome them. Soon after, we see Kaguri calling someone named Takami to investigate something. The next day, the protagonist calls his mom to tell her he's moving, and she replies that if he's a man, he should take care of himself. Later that night, someone approaches a seemingly lost Sekirei and says they'll add her to their collection. Back with Minato, his sister visits him to bring clothes he asked for, and she also takes the chance to check out the place since she'll be studying nearby. Moments later, the protagonist introduces Musubi to his sister, who immediately assumes they're dating. Musubi was about to reveal she's a Sekirei, but the protagonist stops her. Later, Yukari says goodbye to both of them for now and leaves. In that moment, the protagonist reveals that he and his sister were mostly alone growing up because their dad abandoned them and their mom was always working. Musubi starts unpacking everything from the move all at once because she's a combat-type Sekirei, so it's an easy job for her. On the way, the protagonist asks how she created the tornado. She explains that it was a chant, words invoked when using great power. Every Sekirei has their own chant. Later, Miya welcomes them to their new home, shows them their rooms, and Musubi accidentally reveals she's a Sekirei to Miya, but Miya doesn't seem to care. The protagonist tells Musubi she needs to be more careful about what she says, but she reassures him that no matter what, she'll protect him and make him happy. While they're cleaning the room, someone is watching them. Then we see Kaguri heading out for work, and Miya tells them that Kaguri works at a suspicious-sounding club, though they don't believe her. Miya then tells them dinner will be ready soon, so Musubi takes the chance to go bathe. She wanted to bathe with the protagonist, but he's too embarrassed. Meanwhile, the protagonist is thinking about how they fell from such a height and yet nothing happened, so he heads to the tree where they landed. When he touches it, a girl appears before him, asking for help. In the bath, another Sekirei named Tsukiyomi realizes Musubi is a Sekirei too and attacks her. Tsukiyomi bursts out and tells the protagonist to calm Musubi down. The fight was about to escalate when Miya steps in to stop them. Later that night, under the moonlight, we see a woman saying something feels off. Shortly after, we learn from Hamura that people are after the girl trapped in the vegetation. Hamura leaves her alone, and the girl says she'd rather die than get an Ashikabi. The girl, named Kusano, asks the protagonist for help. We then see the protagonist wake up in bed, with Musubi asking if something's wrong. He says it was just a dream. After that, we see Hamura saying the green barrier is ready and they need to hurry before the people searching for the girl come for her. Then, we get a flashback of Kusano being led by someone who looks like Hamura or Kaguri to meet her Ashikabi. Things were going well until they were attacked by the same guy we saw before. He tries to kiss Kusano, but she defends herself and uses her powers to trap herself where she is now. The protagonist wakes up thinking about Kusano, and soon after, he and Musubi go downstairs to find Miya practicing her sword skills, slicing through a ton of leaves. Musubi is so impressed that she asks Miya to spar with her. They start fighting, and the protagonist tries to interrupt, but Tsukiyomi tells him not to stop them since Miya is used to this kind of thing. During the fight, Miya teaches Musubi some new techniques to help her loosen up in battle, and it's clear they're having fun. Tsukiyomi whispers to the protagonist that sometimes they'll have to fight, whether they want to or not. Afterward, we see Minato working at a construction site. During lunch, he eats the food Mia prepared for him, but then a guy sits next to him, eyeing his meal, so Minato shares some with him. While they're talking, the electric twins show up again, and one of them wastes no time running over to kick the guy. Minato is confused, but we learn their names are Hikari and Hibiki, and the guy's name is Seo. Hikari scolds Seo for taking other people's food, but it doesn't take long for them to recognize each other, which results in Minato's lunch falling on the ground. Hibiki offers some bread, so they share it with Minato. We also learn that the twins are Sekirei and that Seo is their Ashikabi. After that, the news reports that MBI is removing the strange vegetation that's been growing in the botanical garden. Kagari makes a call for an explanation and asks them to protect Kusano. Back at work, the protagonist is somewhat relieved that he's met another Ashikabi. Seo tells him that if he's there, it's because he was also contacted about the green girl. The protagonist doesn't really get what he's talking about, but then they're forced to stop working because the area around the botanical garden is being evacuated. Seo suggests they go investigate the green girl. Meanwhile, back home, Musubi wonders where Minato is, and Mia tells her he hasn't returned yet. Minato forgot his phone, and Musubi is anxious, so she wants to take it to him. Before she leaves, Mia gives her a charm to protect her. Later, we see Hikari and Hibiki fighting the MBI forces to get to the green girl. At the same time, Musubi is trying to find the place where Minato works, but when she gets there, she notices it's closed. Soon after, she realizes there's a fight nearby. The protagonist and the others finally manage to enter the forest, and just a few steps in, Kusano appears before Minato. She's the green girl. She shows him a direction, but when he tries to follow her, she disappears, and he bumps into Seo. Seo asks if the girl was wearing a white dress, which means he saw her too. The protagonist insists he has to find her because Kusano was alone and crying. Seo initially came just to check things out, but changes his mind and decides he wants to see for himself what's going on with the protagonist and the green girl. Then we see Homura making his typical dramatic entrance, meeting up with Sekirei number 43, Yomi. She's there to capture the green girl, as her Ashikabi wants to be the first to find her. However, Homura isn't about to hand over the girl to someone like Yomi. Yomi says Homura's opponent will be this girl we saw earlier, who we now know is named Akitsu. Yomi leaves, and Homura recognizes the mark on Akitsu's forehead, realizing she's a discarded number. Moments later, Musubi shows up and confuses Homura for Kagari. He freaks out, but she says she just made a mistake and leaves. To be fair, it's obvious that Homura and Kagari are the same person. After that, Seo asks the protagonist how much he knows about the Sekirei. At the very least, he knows how to give them wings, but he blushes. Seo mentions that this wing-giving process can even be done against the Sekirei's will, so there are people who force it. Then, we see Kusano waking up because she feels someone's presence. It's Yomi, who's planning to take her away. Suddenly, the protagonist senses that he needs to hurry, so the rest follow him. Yomi tries to take her by force, but the protagonist shows up just in time. While Yomi is holding her, the sisters use their lightning to immobilize her. Yomi belittles the Shikabane, and her goal is to bring Kusano to her master. But Musubi arrives just in time to defend the protagonist and breaks Yomi's scythe like it's nothing. But it's not over. Yomi attacks again, and they start fighting while Seo enjoys the show. Seo tells them not to help because this is the protagonist's battle since Kusano chose him. Even though Musubi is barely dressed, she keeps defending Minato. She remembers her training with Mia and uses what she learned to hit Yomi in a key spot, knocking her out and making her lose her Sekirei crest. Yomi's Shikabane is informed that her presence has disappeared. After that, we return to Homura's fight, but it gets interrupted because the guy goes to look for Akitsu. We see them mocking Mikagami for failing to take Kusano and talking about her. The protagonist takes Kusano home, pretending she's a relative's kid. Later, Kusano tells them how she saved him from falling, so the protagonist thanks her. Moments later, Kusano gets up and kisses him, accepting him as her Ashikabi and releasing her wings, making the garden bloom. After that, we see that someone else is after Kusano, even destroying all the vegetation in the forest. Then we see Kagari talking to a white-haired woman who says that Kusano is stable now. This woman, Takami, says she knows Minato better than anyone. We then see the girl from before investigating more about the protagonist. She thinks he's useless, but despite that, he has 2 Sekirei. Later, Minato is about to leave for work, but he sees on the news that a forest was destroyed. He goes to check on Kusano to see what's wrong. She has a small flashback and starts crying, then mentions someone named Shur, who is close to her and taught her everything she knows. So the protagonist immediately assumes that what he saw on the news has to do with Shur. Minato comforts her, and then we see Shur, who doesn't notice Kusano was crying. Later, when the protagonist gets to work, he finds out that Seo quit. Meanwhile, at home, Musubi and Mia are training. When the protagonist gets home, he's disappointed because he wanted to learn more about the Sekirei from Seo. To his surprise, when he gets home, Seo is there. Mia reveals that Seo was friends with her husband, so he often comes to the villa when he's out of food. Seo realizes that the protagonist lives there and, after trying his lunch, says he knows Mia's cooking well. Seo wants to see Kusano, but he's rude, so Mia puts him in his place. Shortly after, Hikari and Hibiki come to pick up Seo. The protagonist takes the chance to thank him for the other day, so Seo gives him his number in case he needs help. Later, while they're bathing, Musubi asks Kasahana who her Ashikabi is. She responds that it's a secret and that they don't need to be so close. Then, while they're sleeping, Kusano gets up to go to the bathroom but notices someone behind her, so she immediately runs to the protagonist's arms. The next morning, Kusano tells everyone she saw a ghost. The protagonist adds that he thought it was a burglar, but when he checked, no one was there. Then Kusano describes the figure as a girl with long hair and glasses. Mia asks Tsukiyomi if she knows who it could be, but she gets nervous, so Mia just says Kusano was probably half asleep since it's impossible for a ghost to appear in the house. After that, Mia tells everyone that it's the anniversary of her husband's death, so she's going to visit his grave. With everyone left alone, Musubi decides she'll make lunch. When they all leave, the protagonist feels like someone is walking behind him but doesn't pay much attention to it. Later, the girls change outfits, and we see Musubi and Kusano preparing lunch. When they finish, the protagonist is surprised by how good it is. Meanwhile, the girl spying on the protagonist starts feeling strange when Mia returns. We then see Shur, who is looking for Kusano but runs into Yukari, who is surprised by how cute Shur is. Shortly after, a girl chasing Shur appears, and as Shur resists, the girl starts attacking. Yukari ends up protecting Shur at first, but as the girl keeps attacking, Yukari takes Shur to escape. Back home, while Musubi is cleaning, something passes by her in the room. The protagonist feels that there's definitely something, so he thinks about telling Kasahana, but she's asleep. She's usually only active for 4 hours. The protagonist asks if it's because she's a Sekirei, and Musubi explains that they're all different. At that moment, we see a flashback when the protagonist picked up Kusano, and there was an MBI helicopter, probably to pick up Yomi, since a Sekirei without a crest can't stay with their Ashikabi. The protagonist asks more about it, and when he finds out, he asks if, when a Sekirei loses their crest, they leave their Ashikabi. Musubi confirms it, and it's something the Sekirei can't escape. After all, the MBI president said it's a game called the Sekirei Project, and when the game ends, everything will be over. But for Musubi, it's not a game because her feelings for the protagonist are real, and she wants to stay by his side forever, so she definitely won't lose. She also mentions that there are rewards for the last Sekirei standing, and that Sekirei will get to choose to stay with their chosen person forever. When Mia arrives, we see that the girl spying on them has her Sekirei crest burning for some reason, and, seemingly out of jealousy, she decides that Musubi is her enemy. Speaking of Musubi, she goes out to buy a few things but is suddenly attacked. Back at home, everything is normal. Minato notices Musubi is taking a while but remains calm, knowing that she's learned well from her training. The person responsible for the attack is the girl spying on them, who used an MBI satellite to attack Mia. While the protagonist is bathing, someone else enters the bath, but it's not anyone he knows. Then we see Yukari, who managed to get Shur to safety. The person in the bath is Sekirei number 2, Matsu. Later, Musubi returns home with her clothes all torn up and forgets to buy a few things, so she wants to go back, but Mia tells her it's not necessary. Matsu knows everything about the protagonist, so in short, she considers him a total failure. But despite that, Matsu wants him to be her Ashikabi. Shortly after, Musubi walks into the bath and finds them. Then we realize that Matsu is the girl who's been spying on the protagonist, and it's clear that she considers Musubi her enemy. So, she traps Musubi with a special net. With Musubi tied up, Matsu tries to get a little too close to the protagonist. At that moment, Mia walks in, having heard the noise coming from the bath. She warns them that such inappropriate behavior is forbidden in Villa Enzumo. Later, Matsu introduces herself, and Milla reveals that Matsu is also a tenant who lives behind a secret door. That's why they noticed someone else. She hides because after leaving MBI, things went south and she ended up being chased. Milla reveals her husband was part of MBI. Next, we see Kitsu with another Sekirei, and moments later, Hamura shows up. Akitsu doesn't waste any time and attacks. Now they plan to take Hamura away since their main mission failed. But they're no match for Hamura, so they end up escaping. Back with Yukari, she can't stop thinking about how cute Shur is. Shur immediately tells Yukari that she'll be her Sekirei and wants to kiss her. Then we return to Hamura, who's exhausted from using all his power. He plans to call Takami but accidentally burns his phone. At this rate, it'll turn to ashes, but he's saved by his Kumi, who has water powers. After this, Hamura asks his Kumi why she doesn't want wings, as Sekirei get their full power with them. She asks him the same thing. Hamura says he doesn't want to become one because those who are associated with fire have been hated for ages. Hamura tells Sakumi that if she wants to be stronger, she needs to kiss her Ashikabi, but Sakumi thinks that's a reaction to a Shikabala and decides to find that person and kill them. At home, while the protagonist is sleeping, he realizes she's right in front of him. Moments later, she kisses him and sprouts her wings. Just then, Mia storms in, angry because nighttime visits are prohibited. Then we see Takami meeting with Manaka. He mentions that the event he prepared for so long ended quickly and he was expecting a more epic fight. Takami says that 90% of the Sekirei have received their wings, so Manaka decides it's time to act. The next morning, everyone eats together since Matsu doesn't have to hide anymore. Well, everyone except Asum, who's strangely asleep. Seconds later, the protagonist notices Kaguri has a wound on her hand and her whole body. She just says she got a bit burned, which seems suspicious. Later, Musubi trains as usual, while the protagonist has a kinda dream with Yukiumi where she threatens to kill him. Upon waking, Yukari tells him that some things happened and she'll be visiting him. The protagonist thinks about the dream he had, feeling the same way he did when he met Kusano. So, he goes to ask Matsu about it. She tells him everything about the Sekirei project, saying that most Sekirei have wings. Now the real game begins, the fight between Sekirei until only one remains. The protagonist wonders if there's anything he can do. He doesn't care about the prize, but wants to avoid everyone ending up like that Sekirei who lost her mark. Moments later, the protagonist tells Matsu about the dream he had. She says a stronger Sekirei is reacting to him. Matsu manages to find her Kumi, and the protagonist recognizes her. Matsu warns that this person is dangerous, she's a water Sekirei who hates Ashikabi. That's when the protagonist decides to look for his Kumi and work to get her to join them. So, Matsu uses the satellite to make a plan where the protagonist will be the bait. The plan starts, and the protagonist goes out with Kusano. He gets startled when a cat almost falls on him, but Kusano saves him. Then he realizes Zio was there. Meanwhile, Sakumi feels that growing feeling in her chest and can't handle it anymore, so she wants to find the protagonist and kill him. Moments later, Hikari and Hibiki appear before her. Their goal is to take the Sekirei without wings out of the game, so they fight Sakumi, but they're no match for her. After that, Zio notices that the protagonist has gathered more Sekirei and recognizes Matsu since he's the one who set up her room. Later, Hibiki and Hikari show up to warn them that someone dangerous is after them. Sakumi lands on the protagonist, but that weakens her body. However, she gets up again to finish off Minato. Kusano steps in to defend him, but the protagonist reminds him that Sakumi needs to give them a kiss, so it has to be him. Seeing the protagonist with a girl, Sakumi angrily tells him to get his dirty hands off her and starts attacking him non-stop. She doesn't even use her full power. The protagonist gets up and says he wants to be Sashiki because they need her power. This makes Sakumi even angrier. She wasn't planning to kill him, but now she decides to. She launches one of her most powerful attacks, but at the last moment, her arm is deflected and misses. The protagonist's will doesn't break, and Sakumi starts feeling that sensation in her chest again. Just as she's about to attack him again, Hikari, Hibiki, and Seo intervene. Sukumi realizes Seo is also a Sekirei and releases her wings. The protagonist covers Kusano's eyes, and with their wings out, Hikari and Hibiki prepare a joint attack. It's powerful, but the protagonist starts moving in the lab. Matsu notices the huge amount of energy the twins are emitting and warns Musubi. Then we see the protagonist taking the hit for Sukumi so she wouldn't get hurt. The twins prepare to attack again. This time, Sukumi tries to escape, but she's cornered and immobilized. She's told that her Ashikabi powers were given to her by Takahito, Milla's late husband, making her special. He threatens to give Sukumi wings and make her his personal slave, but she doesn't want that. The protagonist then intervenes, saying she's a Sekirei, which makes Sukumi blush. The twins give her what she deserves since he had said they'd be his only Sekirei. Moments later, Sukumi comes down to tell the protagonist to take responsibility for his words. She wants him to be her Ashikabi since he saved her earlier. She asks for his name, and Tsukiyomi agrees to it, becoming his Sekirei. She says that from now on, the only one who can kill him is her. She kisses him and spreads her wings for the first time, feeling a warm sensation throughout her body. Now they're bound together forever. Shortly after, Sukumi realizes Kusano is also a Sekirei of Minato, and quickly figures out Musubi is too. She gets angry and asks the protagonist how many Sekirei he has. He replies 4, which makes Sukumi even angrier, and she hits him. Later, everyone returns home with a new member. Sukumi introduces herself to Miya as the protagonist's wife, making both Musubi and Kusano jealous. Kaga is surprised that the protagonist managed to give wings to a Sekirei who hated Ashikabi. Soon, Minato tries to explain to Miya what's going on, but she already knows about the Sekirei project. Moments later, Sukumi looks at Kaguri and finds her familiar. At this point, there's no need to hide anymore. Kaguri and Hamura are the same person. It's incredible they didn't recognize her just because of a mask. Later, Matsu approaches Kaguri to ask about her wounds. Kaguri already knows he's a Sekirei, so she tells him to find his wings soon. He says he hasn't been chosen by anyone and won't choose anyone, he only seeks revenge. Suddenly, he starts feeling pain in his chest but says he'll go work anyway. Meanwhile, Yukari feels very uncomfortable being alone with a guy while Shur is bathing. We see a flashback continuing from earlier. She didn't understand what Shur meant, so Shur explains the Sekirei project. When Shur gets out of the bath, Yukari is mortified. Shur then invites her to go shopping the next day, but Shur warns her they might be followed. Yukari has a plan. Meanwhile, Asum shows up. Sukumi thinks she's also a Sekirei of the protagonist, but Asum says her Ashikabi isn't there. Sukumi marks her territory again and says she's Minato's wife, making Musubi and Kusano even angrier. Later, Kusano asks the protagonist which of them he likes. He ends up saying he likes them all because they all chose him, even though he's a talentless fool. That's why he wants to respond to all the feelings they've given him. The protagonist thinks he'd rather have these moments of peace instead of fighting, but at the same time, Takami informs Manaka that Sukumi has received her wings. There's no time to waste, he'll set the second stage of the Sekirei project in motion. Takami tells Manaka that the personnel deployment is complete. Manaka asks what she's afraid of, and she just says she's surprised. Manaka adds that since they touched God's body and received the title of Game Master, everything has been crazy. We flash back to 1999 on Kamakura Island. They came from far away to explore. Takami throws a rock at Manaka to stop his nonsense, since the island is a geological anomaly, so they need to stay alert. Takami can't understand why Manaka is called a genius from university when he's actually crazy. Shortly after, Manaka makes a discovery, and they enter a place where they find girls in incubators. Then we see the protagonist in a rather heated situation. He doesn't know how he ended up there, but Miya scolds him because she had already told him that inappropriate relationships with the opposite sex are prohibited in Villa and Zumo. Milla then hands him the new room assignments. Kusano will sleep with her in her room, while Musubi and Sukumi will share a room. Meanwhile, Matsu is thrilled because the barriers for her experiment have been removed. However, she notices that the private soldiers have shifted positions. Miya will be going out to do some shopping, leaving them home alone. Later, Tsukiyomi runs into Kaguri again, and the feeling that she knows her grows stronger. Next, we see a guy in a car dropping off a girl who's heading to visit Musubi. When she arrives, Musubi accidentally splashes her with water. The girl introduces herself as Karasuba, revealing that she and Musubi know each other. The protagonist comes out to see who arrived, and Musubi gives Karasuba some clothes. Karasuba immediately asks if Minato is her Ashikabi, revealing that she's also a Sekirei and has already received her wings. Karasuba is aware that Musubi defeated Yomi and reminds her of a promise they made. Later, Matsu tells the protagonist they need to talk. She asks if anyone came over, and he replies that it was someone Musubi knows. When Matsu sees Karasuba, she quickly hides. Afterward, Karasuba decides to leave, saying goodbye to Musubi and wanting to stay in touch, while Sukumi watches her with suspicion. As Karasuba is leaving, she spots Hamura but doesn't pay much attention. Hamura reveals that Karasuba is Sekirei number 4, nicknamed the Black Sekirei. The protagonist tells Matsu that Karasuba has left. She's still hiding in fear, thinking Karasuba might kill her. Moments later, she gets an alert and tells the protagonist to check the TV downstairs. On the screen, Minaka announces that MBI has taken control of the capital, claiming that the new era of gods has begun. However, Minaka says there's nothing to fear, although they'll stop anyone trying to leave the city. Matsu informs everyone that the second phase of the project has started. She explains that the capital is surrounded by the Shuin River and all city exits have been closed, but there will be checks to prepare all Sekirei and Ashikabi. In short, Minaka plans to turn the city into a battlefield. Later, while Mia is coming back, she encounters Karasuba. Mia gets alert, knowing Karasuba can't be trusted. Karasuba simply comments on Mia's nice place and says she won't do anything for now, but Mia won't forgive her. They face off in Villa and Zumo, their tension rising until an apple falls, preventing a fight. Karasuba didn't bring her sword, and Mia would have fought with a tuber. Karasuba reveals something important: Mia is also a Sekirei, in fact, Sekirei number 1. After that, Karasuba leaves but says they'll meet again. Seeing the helicopters, Mia realizes phase 2 has begun. We then see Karasuba back with her Ashikabi, Natsu. She asks him to stop the car because she saw Dukire and more. Karasuba heads straight to fight Mitsuha and Akitsu. Mitsuha wants to fight, but Akitsu tells her to flee, knowing Karasuba is the Black Sekirei. Mitsuha ignores the warning and charges, but in the blink of an eye, Karasuba cuts her down. Akitsu isn't stupid and escapes. Back at home, the protagonist wonders what he should prepare for and who the earlier woman was. Moments later, he asks Musubi where Sukumi is since he hasn't seen her. Musubi says Sukumi is also gone because she went out. Now that they're alone, Musubi wants to talk to the protagonist about the promise she made with Karasuba. We see a flashback of their conversation. Musubi says her Ashikabi will be someone she loves, but Karasuba disagreed, saying they'd fight until only the two of them are left. If Musubi wins, it'll be because she was right. So, the promise was that they both survive until the end, then Musubi would defeat and take all Sekirei whose wings were broken and free them again into the sky. She then tells the protagonist that she loves him and that knowing him and the others makes her stronger. She wants to prove this to Karasuba. The protagonist supports Musubi's dream. He believes in her, her words, and her smile. Meanwhile, Sukumi talks to Hamura, still unaware that he's Kagari despite how obvious it is. Sukumi refuses to fight until the suffering is unbearable. Hamura tells her that the second phase of the project has been activated because almost all Sekirei have their wings now. At that moment, Sukumi realizes that becoming Minato's Sekirei triggered the second phase. She leaves and tells Hamura to stop showing up in front of her if he's not planning to fight. Next, we catch up with Yukari, who decides to dress Shur as a girl to avoid being recognized. Little does she know, they're being watched from the car, and they already know Shur hasn't received his wings yet. The brown-haired guy, Mikagami Hayato, who previously tried to forcefully take Kusano, now wants to go after Shur personally. Back at home, they're getting clothes ready for Sukumi to do the cleaning, but she refuses. Soon after, Mia comes back with the shopping and suggests they all go out. She refuses, but when Mia says that whoever arrives first will get to sit next to the protagonist, they both head out quickly. Later that night, there's a battle between Sekirei. The one with the white candles defeats and takes the mark from the other. At the same time, this woman feels the wind blowing unpleasantly. We see MBI blocking exits to prevent people from leaving until these two try to sneak through. They are Sekirei 95, Kuno and Swash, with Kabi Shurji Haruka. However, they encounter the Sekirei known as the Blue Sekirei, Hain. She warns them that if they pass that point, they'll die. Kuno wants to turn back, but now that they're deep into it, Juka refuses. Kuno knows they can't win against Hain, so when MBI agents rush at them, Haruka grabs Kuno's hand, and they start running. Hamura watches this and, seeing Hain free, assumes Manaka is serious about this. Meanwhile, at home, the protagonist is watching Musubi in a swimsuit, and Sakumi notices and gets jealous. Later, the protagonist tells Matsu that it's mealtime, but she's busy checking MBI's secret database, which has info on Sekirei with wings and their Ashikabi's abilities. Everything's available, but she's puzzled by a Sekirei who leaves opponents on the brink of death and just walks away. Matsu doesn't understand this Sekirei's behavior. Staying with the defeated Sekirei's body is more than just courtesy, it earns MBI's recognition. Otherwise, it means the fight was pointless. Musubi then goes to look for Asum to eat but can't find her. We see Asum visiting someone named Chijo. Back home, the protagonist asks Mia about Yuzum. She explains that Yuzum was everything to someone and only wanted to see that person smile, but that person has been hospitalized for a long time. Mia isn't sure if that person is an Ashikabi. Later, Musubi and Sakumi return with the shopping, but Musubi wins again. The protagonist interrupts them to talk. Asum says goodbye to Chijo, confirming that Chijo is Asum's Ashikabi. That night, Matsu explains that a dangerous Sekirei has appeared, so they need to keep a low profile. Hearing what the Sekirei has done, Sakumi and Musubi are offended and want to fight her, and Yusano joins them. The protagonist wonders if talking to them was the right move since it had the opposite effect. Sakumi then approaches the protagonist and asks if he's worried about her. Seeing him blush, he can't help but think she's cute. Sakumi reassures him that she's the strongest. When Minato leaves the room, he gets nervous because Musubi is outside even though he didn't do anything wrong. Soon after, Asum arrives, and Matsu comments that she's been going out too much lately. Asum just says she's looking for a job, but Matsu notices blood on her leg. While Asum and the others are bathing, Matsu takes the chance to investigate. Later, we see Hayato again, surprised that the Black Sekirei defeated Mitsuha. He wonders why the disciplined squad would act against its allies. Hayato then questions what to do with Yukari and Shur. Meanwhile, Yukari and Shur are spending time together, having dinner. Yukari wants Shur to tell her more about his goal. He reveals he's been searching for his sister, Kusano, who was chased out of the city by someone with a whip. Yukari decides to help him find Kusano and shares that she has a brother who was always there for her. Shur hopes Kusano can meet someone like that, and Yukari promises they'll look for Kusano together the next day. Meanwhile, they're being watched by Akitsu. The next day we see Asum again and we find out why she had bloodstains on her that time she became a pawn of someone called Higa Isumi, who this time orders her to kill Kuno. This guy threatens them, warning him that he doesn't have much time left for his Ashikabi. On the other hand, Musubi and Sakumi prepare to fight that mysterious Sekirei, not knowing that they will probably have to face someone they know. But before that, Musubi and Sakumi fight a little bit between them. After that they leave, then we see Kuno and Juka keep running away until she falls. At that moment the mysterious Sekirei appears before them, who warns Haruka to leave when they are attacked. Kuno uses his skills to repel the attack, which is a scream that Musubi and Sakumi end up hearing, so they head over there despite the fact that they are going to be attacked. So they head over there even though it was a loud scream. The mysterious Sekirei was still in Lisa, so she attacks them, but just then Sakumi and Musubi appear. At that moment, what a surprise, we find out that the mysterious Sekirei is Susumu. However, she doesn't want to fight against her friend Sakumi. Seeing that the mysterious Sekirei doesn't reveal her identity, decides to attack first. Then Haruka and Kuno, they want to take the opportunity to escape, but the woman we saw earlier appears reeking of alcohol. The fight starts. Sakumi launches her first attack. Musubi is excited to see a strong enemy. After a moment, the woman in purple seems to intervene, however she does so defending the Sirai and Mysteriosa, as she thinks the fight is unfair. After that, Musubi appears before Kuno and Haruka to fight. Kuno, seeing how Musubi is physically, admits that she would lose in all aspects. Haruka tells Musubi that they are not going to fight, but the ones that are still fighting are these three. The woman reveals her name. She is the Ser and 3K's Jana, and hates that Suki Humi talks to her that way. Only Sekirei No. 1 and Manaka can talk to her, so Kasana uses her powers to escape along with the Sirai. Mysterious. After that, he asks Kazuhana why she saved her. She says she knows her from before because she knows she is Yuzum, so he asks her if Mia is okay. Yuzum then challenges Case Jana to a fight. While at home, the main character was talking about how long it was taking everyone to get home and helping with the cleaning, because since the capital is closed, she hasn't had to go to work now. Now that they are at home alone, she wants to take the opportunity to seduce him, but at that moment Kagari appears. Matsu just tells her that he was experimenting and offers to experiment with him too, but Kagari sets him on fire to make him behave himself. Then Kagari asks him for medicine. His body is unstable, and it is the first time it has happened. Matsu says that maybe it can be something else, but he leaves immediately. While he has some clothes on his body and he is not sure what to do. While he has the clothes, the prota thinks about what Matsu told him a few moments ago, that he should trust himself more. At that moment Musubi appears and falls on him and then takes him to meet someone. Musubi took him to the place where he lived before, and now Kuno and Juka are staying there, so now the prota knows them, and Musubi had told them a little about Minato before. Haruka asks Musubi what type of Sekirei Swashikabi is. The protagonist doesn't answer, and Musubi says she will come up with something later. After that, she tells the protagonist that she wants him to help Kuno and Juka. Later, Kumi returns searching for Minato, but Matsu tells her that Musubi took him. Then Tsukiyomi tells Matsu about the mysterious Sekirei, and at that moment, Matsu starts to suspect something. Tsukiyomi mentions that the previous fight was too much for Kuno, who is very weak, but Matsu tells her that Kuno might have potential for the future and clarifies that a Sekirei should not only know how to fight but also use their head. Back with the protagonist, Juka comments that she has failed the university entrance exam twice. Minato gets excited as he has met someone like him who also failed the university entrance exam twice, and they ended up being Ashikabi. Haruka mentions that the only difference between them is their Sekirei. The protagonist asks Haruka to explain his problem. He mentions that he does not want to fight, and even if he wanted to, it is impossible because Kuno is not good at it and only has her voice. Haruka wants the protagonist to help him escape from the capital. Later, Matsu tells Kumi and Kusano that they need to be more careful, as the whole city is a battlefield. The protagonist does not understand why Juka cannot leave, so he is told that there are MBI helicopters flying day and night. The last time they tried to escape over the bridge, there was the Blue Sekirei and the Discipline Squad, a group of Sekirei who follow MBI's orders. Haruka gets angry, knowing that Minato is calm because he has a good Sekirei. Back home, the protagonist tells Musubi that he is happy to have met someone like Juka but is unsure if he will be able to help them. The next morning, the protagonist wakes up with Yuzum and Kasahana. Tsukiyomi gets jealous, but the protagonist didn't even know they were sleeping with him. Upon seeing Minato, Kasahana says he looks quite like someone she knows. Soon after, Milla arrives to calm Kumi. Upon seeing Milla, KJ realizes he is in Delayuma. Later, Yuzum says she met Kasana by chance on the street. Then we have a flashback where Yuzum challenged Kasana to a fight. She refused, and although Yuzum tried to attack her, she was no match. They make a deal, and Han ignores this, inviting Yuzum to drink. Later, the protagonist tells everyone about Juka wanting to escape the city. Yuzum becomes disheartened, remembering that her mission was to eliminate Kuno so that her Ashikabi, Mijo, would have a better chance of survival. The protagonist goes to see Matsu to see if escaping the capital is possible. She mentions an option, referring to Sicker Island, where students found ruins that were more advanced than anything human. There, beings with human-like forms, genetically close to humans but stronger, slept. This is how Sekirei came to be, and that student who discovered them was Manaka. To prepare the world for this new technology, he created MBI to carry out his plan. The point is that no one can simply abandon the game just like that. Matsu warns the protagonist that helping Juka will mean they will both be considered rebels. The next day, the protagonist thinks the idea of escaping is useless, but Musubi tells him that their wishes will come true. Then we see Natsu talking with Karasuba. Natsuo is already aware, thanks to Jane, that Haruka and Kuno were trying to escape the capital. Jane said she let them escape because they seemed interesting. Then we see a flashback of Kuno escaping from the twins. At one point, she falls and starts crying. Soon after, she screams, and thanks to that, she manages to escape but feels bad for being a Sekirei who couldn't fight because she lacked strength. It was at that moment that Juka saw her for the first time. He approached her because he saw her crying and gave her something to protect her from the cold. When Juka was leaving, Kuno held him, and that's when she knew he would be her Ashikabi. Back in the present, Kei's Hanana listens excitedly to the story of both of them, and when she learns of the escape plan, she insists on coming. Zio is also there and understands that they want to escape but hates that they made a fuss in the middle of the night without warning. He hates how MBI is acting, so he will help them but will charge them for it until Mia calls to threaten him. Then we see that almost everyone agrees to help them escape except Herkumi, who cannot stand helping someone incapable of fighting since the duty of a Sekirei is to fight. Tsukumi points out to Matsu that she also hides without fighting. Later, Tsukiyomi talks with Mia, who simply says that helping someone because they have problems is natural. Tsukumi mentions that at first, she wanted to become the strongest Sekirei, but now she wants to be strong while being with the protagonist for the rest of her life. She asks Mia not to tell anyone. That's why Mia offers to train her. After that, we review the escape plan. Seo tells the protagonist that of the 3 territories they can escape through, only one is interested in Minato, and it is the one that was pursuing Kusano. Mikagami controls the south, the west is controlled by someone named Sanada, while Jan has seen the one who controls the east a couple of times, but he goes against the Sekirei plan. Then we see Yuzum visit Mijo. They go after her to remind her that the target escaped, so they warn her that she only has one chance. The protagonist mentions that although there are 3 powerful ones, the North Territory remains unclaimed. But that's because Villa Yuma is to the north. Speaking of which, we see how Ma trains Herkumi, who is surprised by Milla's speed and strength. Back with Seo, he mentions that to the north, there is a river called Araja that separates the capital from the outside. If they manage to cross it, MBI won't pursue them. The only option is to pass through a bridge. Juka refuses because she has tried it before, but Seo explains that there is a parallel territory with guards on the bridge, but no inspectors. They will only have to fight against them. However, Seo warns that there is a problem, MBI's satellite that is capable of launching a laser beam. That's when the protagonist suggests asking Matsu to disable the satellite. The satellite isn't the only problem. Another issue is the Discipline Squad Sekirei, the Blue Sekirei, the Red Sekirei, and the Black Sekirei. This excites Musubi. Seo then explains that they will leave the next day. They must act quickly and escape at night. One laments being so weak while the twins tell him that this wouldn't have happened if he had escaped before getting his wings. Haruka tells him that he is her man and that she will be with him. After that, Case Janet mentions again that Minato resembles someone else. Later, Seo sends Matsu the plan via email. She mentions that she will be able to disable the satellite for only 1 hour before the escape. They prepare a dinner to celebrate, and at that moment, Juka asks the protagonist why they don't escape together. The protagonist doesn't respond because he goes to find his Kumi to join the celebration. She insists that she will not change her mind. The protagonist tells her that if the Discipline Squad appears, the only one capable of fighting is Musubi. She asks if he doubts the plan or is worried about Musubi. Shortly after, Yuzum returns home, and Case Jana tells her to join the farewell party, but she skips it. Then we see that the protagonist is mortified with embarrassment after having touched his Kumi. The next morning, the protagonist wakes up startled because Yukari is calling him. She is looking for Kusano along with Shur, not knowing that Akitsu and another guy are there, ready to attack at night. Later, the protagonist thinks about what Juka told him. Mia approaches Kaguri to tell him that he should have joined them last night. He says he was working, but Mia knows he hasn't been going to work lately. Mia can tell just by looking at him that his change has begun. After that, we see that Musubi is excited and determined to protect everyone until night falls and everyone is ready to leave. The protagonist thinks that Tsukumi won't participate after all. Haruka reminds the protagonist of what was said the previous night, but he only focuses on carrying out the plan to leave the capital. After that, we see that Jihani informs Natsuo of disturbances, so he will go. Natsuo asks if, before becoming Ashikabi, the Discipline Squad members knew each other. Karasuba replies that yes, but there were only 2 of them. They then mention that Sekirei number 88, the Fate Sekirei, is already doomed and that undercover agents have taken the body of number 88. After that, we see the scene from the beginning of the anime. This girl is holding someone and tells them that one day they will get their wings and find someone destined to be with them. Karasuba laments not having killed that Sekirei with her own hands, as that Sekirei joins someone else. After that, we see Kaguri join, but only to observe, as she, as the guardian of the Sekirei, wants to see everything with her own eyes. Everyone is near the bridge. There are about 2 minutes left before Matsu disables the satellite. The plan is for them to create a commotion at the observation point to distract the guards, and also to attack the train station transformer to prevent reinforcements from arriving. At that moment, they must run across the bridge and escape. Shortly after, the plan starts, and Matsu does her part, so the team gets moving. They kiss the twins so they can unleash their wings and make a combined attack. Kusano then approaches the guards, and by the time they realize she is a Sekirei, Kusano has already trapped them. While fleeing, we notice that Yuzum does not plan to let Kuno and Juka escape. Then Kagure mentions that they are doing everything too quickly. Shortly after, Kazahana notices that the wind direction changes, and then we see Takami inform Minaka that the satellite is not working. However, Minaka expected this from the beginning. Then we see that Matsu notices that the troops are moving very quickly and the numbers are increasing. She tells everyone that they need to evacuate. After this, the protagonist worries about Kusano. The MBI has anticipated all possible moves, so Matsu tries to find a possible escape route. Matsu loses contact with Seo because the twins aim badly and damage the phone. Shortly after, the protagonist contacts Matsu to tell her he will return to save Kusano. She warns him that it is reckless since the discipline squad won't hesitate to kill him, but the protagonist insists because he promised Kusano he would take care of her. At that moment, Matsu thinks about what Urkumi told her moments earlier. When the protagonist is about to go find Kusano, Matsu tells him that the plans have changed and that she will take care of saving Kusano. Meanwhile, Tsukiyomi was on top of the house and noticed it starting to move. Then she saw Matsu ready on a motorcycle to rescue Kusano. Tsukumi asks if she hadn't decided never to leave Villa Yuma, but Matsu is taking risks and making every effort. Later, the protagonist and the others arrive at the bridge. Musubi is worried about Kusano, but the protagonist tells her that Matsu will help her. Speaking of Kusano, despite being covered by plants, she is surrounded by many guards who soon prepare to shoot, but at that moment, Matsu arrives to rescue her. Now carrying Kusano on her back, they shoot at the guards. The city is in chaos. Yukari wakes up upon hearing everything and notices that Shur is looking out the window. He immediately realizes that those branches are Kusano's, so they both go out to look for her. Unbeknownst to them, the kids are about to cross the bridge and be free, but Musubi stops them because in front of them are the discipline squad members, Jane and Bennett Subasa. Musubi gets excited and prepares to fight, launching herself against both of them at once. Bennett Subasa then asks Musubi if Karasuba wasn't taking care of her. After that, Bennett Subasa loses patience and attacks Musubi, hitting her repeatedly until apparently defeating her. Meanwhile, Tsukiyomi is sinking into anxiety, so Mia tells her that if she really wants to be the protagonist's wife, she will have to go help him. Back with Musubi, she is still unharmed and refuses to lose, but Vitsuba gets angry and launches a powerful attack. Chikabum is worried about Minato but doesn't have time to act as Bennett Subasa, with a crazed look, continues to attack. Next, we see that the protagonist is about to fall off the bridge. Musubi is about to help him, but Benitez threatens to kill him. Meanwhile, Jane prepares to finish off Kuno. Then, Benitez Subasa launches another strong attack against Musubi. The protagonist manages to climb back up and, seeing Musubi in that state, asks her to escape, but she refuses. As they were about to shake hands, Benitez Subasa delivers the final blow to Musubi. Meanwhile, at home, Mia tries to convince Herkumi to go help, but after some thought, she remembers how much she loves Minato and leaves to fight. Back on the battlefield, the protagonist is desperate because Musubi's Sekirei mark is disappearing. By the time he crawls to her, the mark has finally vanished. Desperate, the protagonist tries to wake Musubi up, remembering that she wanted to stay by his side and had promised never to lose. Benitez Subasa mocks the protagonist's pain. Juka tries to intervene, but Jane won't allow it. Additionally, she attempts to attack Kuno, but Juka steps in and takes the hit. At that moment, she remembers how she convinced Haruka to be her Ashikabi, but reassures herself that he's okay. Then, Kuno uses her prayer, declaring her love for Juka and releasing her wings. Moments later, she uses her voice, and the song she sings is beautiful. But not only that, the melody drains Jane's strength. Juka names the ability the Sweet Sweet Song, but Kuno pleads not to give it such a strange name. Kuno's song drains Jane's strength, and she no longer cares about the discipline squad. Benitez Subasa tells Jane to get up, but she also starts losing her strength. However, Kuno can't keep this up forever, so she suddenly stops and coughs up blood. Juka holds her, saying that she finally did something useful, and with more tact, Juka tells her that she wasn't as useless as he thought. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues trying to protect Musubi, but Benitez Subasa gets angry because a mere monkey is challenging her. Seconds later, the protagonist's phone falls to the ground. Then, Benita's Subasa launches a kick, but before she can hit the protagonist, Tsukumi appears to save him. She is concerned to see Musubi in that state. Tsukiyomi gets angry and unleashes her power to fight Benita's Subasa, but this fight is not only against her, as Jane will not stay idle. Tsukiyomi creates a sword with her water. Meanwhile, they discuss how the appearance of the disciplined squad has negatively impacted the situation. Case Jana won't stay just observing the fight between these three. Tsukumi dodges attacks and counterattacks while lamenting having been so proud initially, as otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. Despite it being 2 against 1, Tsukiyomi has the advantage, wounding Benita's Subasa, who is surprised that the protagonist has a Seirei. Meanwhile, the protagonist is crying over Musubi. Then, Benita's Subasa decides that the protagonist is a nuisance and will deal with him. Tsukiyomi tries to defend him, but Jane immobilizes her. Yuzum can't bear to watch any longer and intervenes, but she encounters Case Jana, who tells her not to intervene yet, referring to someone else. Meanwhile, Yukari and Shur continue their search for Kusano. Shortly after, Shur starts to feel her presence, just like she does. Back on the battlefield, Benita's Subasa is about to finish off the protagonist, and everyone is desperate about the situation he's in, but Minato manages to free himself. At the same time, Mashu detects that something bad is happening to the protagonist and starts moving toward him. Shur arrives where they are but encounters her pursuers. Everyone tells Minato to flee, but he refuses to leave his loved ones behind. Seeing this, Benita's Subasa prepares to attack again while Zio remains hidden. However, something impressive happens. Before Benita's Subasa can strike the protagonist, Musubi begins to glow. Meanwhile, cornered, Shur and Yukari kiss, revealing their wings. Shur then uses her abilities to return to Minato. She has a kind of vision where she is underwater, and someone tells her to learn to love others. At that moment, Musubi wakes up with her wings and a new mark because she is actually the girl we saw at the beginning, the Sekirei of Destiny, Yum, leaving everyone surprised. Musubi attacks Jane and Benita's Subasa, and as a side effect, manages to free Tsukumi. Just then, Matsu and Kusano arrive, wondering what that light was. Jane is surprised and asks Yum who she is. She says she is the spearhead of the MBI's Plan S. The protagonist doesn't understand anything, and Matsu tells him that this is the old name of the Sekirei plan. Yum decides that neither of the two has enough love, so she lifts them and throws them far away. After that, she recognizes the warm and kind heart of the protagonist, as that's what awakened her. Yum is happy that Musubi has joined someone like Minato, but just then, Karasuba appears and welcomes Yum by drawing her sword. Yum simply dodges and tells her she won't be the one to stop her. At that moment, Yum switches places with Musubi, and Karasuba stops attacking her. Musubi innocently tells Karasuba that she was attacked by the disciplined squad. Karasuba just pretends and tells her that if she lost to Benita's, it's because she still needs to become stronger. But that's not the important part. What's important is that the protagonist reunites with Musubi. Tsukumi tells Karasuba that if she plans to interfere, she won't forgive her, but Karasuba replies that they should worry about something more pressing. The time had already passed, and MBI's satellites were back online. So, the satellite fires a laser beam, almost hitting everyone. Haruka and Kuno were about to fall but were saved by Yuzum. They didn't even realize they were saved, only seeing a big white veil. Everything ended well, even Yukari managed to win, and they promised to stay together forever. Meanwhile, Zio and the twins finally come out of hiding with the coast clear. Juka and Kuno ask Minato if he won't go with them, but the protagonist feels there's something he must do there, though he doesn't know what it is yet. However, he's certain it's something he can handle. Haruka and Kuno leave, saying they will see them again. After that, we see Kazahana, who finally confirms Minato's bravery, while Karasuba returns, saying she wanted Musubi to become stronger. Now that they're safe, they should leave before MBI arrives. At that moment, the protagonist apologizes to everyone for only depending on them and putting them in danger. But Musubi tells him that thanks to him, they can all do their best, and that all they need is for him to be there. Since none of them want to lose to Musubi, they all embrace the protagonist together. After that, they all eat together. The news that Musubi has reactivated reaches Takami. On the other hand, this guy doesn't seem to tire of losing, and he wonders if there will be another Sekirei for him, while Vitsuba is upset about losing to Musubi. Besides that, we see Karasuba is more excited than usual and says that the fun has only just begun. We also see Yuzum visiting Mijo, and how Yukari and Shur continue searching for Kusano. Later, We see that Kagura is still feeling strange until Cash tells him that their bodies are honest, and we see the protagonist going to school even though he's injured, as he's been missing too much lately. Before leaving, Case Jana tells Kagura that the Sekirei react when they meet the person they're destined for. At that moment, we see Kagura transitioning from a boy to a girl, but this story is just beginning. That wraps up our summary of Sekirei. I hope you enjoyed the deep dive into this action-packed series. If you have any thoughts or questions about the anime, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more anime content. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.